love to know where you are dialing in from. So if you would not mind, over in the comments section, which is probably on the right side of your screen, let us know where you're coming from, who you work with, whatever you want to tell us. But we'd love to know that. In the meantime, while you all are getting situated over there, we're going to go ahead and see where our guests are coming. First of all, we have Kim Wyatt. Kim, where are you at right now?
I am in San Diego today.
Awesome. Awesome. How's the weather out there?
You know, it's a little cloudy. Hopefully we get cleared up and sunshine.
San Diego and clouds. That is just not something you say in the same sentence typically.
I know.
Greg, where are you calling in from?
From Dallas, Texas. Hot Dallas, Texas today.
Yeah. Is it still really, really hot there?
I would say it's not really, really hot. Now that we've had like over 100, 9, 10. So actually it feels real good now
right.
When it's a little bit below 100. So it's all relative.
That's so funny. A little bit below 100 sounds good. Jeez. I see Edwina joining us, and we'll see who else is coming on. I'm actually calling in from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We had some gloomy days at the beginning of this week, but today it's just beautiful fall weather. It's like high 60s, a little sunny out right now, so it's great. But listen, we have a terrific discussion that we're going to go through today, and it is called The Secret to Building Diverse and Inclusive Work Cultures. Just in time, by the way, as we set sail on October's Global Diversity Awareness Month. So this is a great timing for us to have this discussion. Welcome also, Hadrian. I'm going to give that one a shot there. Before I introduce my guests, let me remind you that TalentSmart is the world's premier provider of emotional intelligence assessments and programming around the world. We are based in San Diego, which is where Kim is coming from. And as I said, I am based in Pittsburgh. I'm the director of training with TalentSmart EQ. So allow me to introduce my two guests. First of all, we do have Dr. Greg Campbell. He's the Vice President of Law Enforcement and Government here at TalentSmart. And Greg received his DEI certification from Cornell University. He has experience leading training in enterprise-wide DEI programs in the government and private sector. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, David. It's glad to be here with everyone today.
Absolutely. And we have Kim Wyatt, also from TalentSmart. She is the Manager of Operations and Human Resources. Kim has been with us for over 4 years, and she leads TalentSmart's DEI and B initiatives, programming. Previously, Kim was working in the fine arts and acting industries in Los Angeles, where she developed a passion for the human psyche and experience. It's a nice transition there. I love that. And welcome, Miss Amy Miller, too. Thank you very well for joining. So let's get this started. And I want to start over with Greg. So, Greg, when you think about it, in your experience over the years of working in building diverse and inclusive cultures, why is it so important? Just like that big why. Why is it so important?
Thank you, David, for asking that question. And the reason why I feel that's a wonderful question is depending on what state you're in the United States or what part of the world you're in. Diversity could be a hot topic and really embraced in your state, or you could live in a state where diversity is actually being politicized or polarized. So depending on where you are, is the temperature of the topic. But the reason I love that question is because of the facts about diversity. What does the research say about diversity? And diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is important because it enhances innovation and creativity for companies. It improves our decision making, our problem solving. It builds a better brand for our company. So there's so many wonderful things about diversity, and I'm happy to be here to talk about the facts about diversity and not get caught up in politics or things that are politicizing or drive a wedge between people. It's all about unity today on this call and why inclusion and inclusive cultures are valuable to organizations.
Yeah, thanks for putting it that way, because I think that's so true. Organizations really do have an opportunity here to broaden their just thinking, because I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in that whole frame of even just thinking differently, right? And when you live in different cultures, you think differently because you were raised differently, because you've experienced things differently. And when you bring that to the table in a company, any company, you can actually bring a different thought that maybe somebody who's never experienced what you've experienced actually might ask the question, wow, tell me more about that, and really help the company move maybe some of their marketing or their sales initiatives in a different direction. I mean, would you agree with that, Greg?
I would. It creates global competitiveness.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Kim, as the person who leads the charge here at Talent Smart, why have you seen this to be important? From your perspective on our kind of, little like frame up here, what would you say?
Yeah, and it is so important, David, because an organization that can foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, that organization is opening the door, like Greg says, for innovation and creativity, which is what personally drives me. And as we explore these ideas today, we're not just talking about the superficial categories of DE and I, as we're aware. Rather, I'd like to explore this idea of having exposure to multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
Just that idea, multiple perspectives can directly influence and hopefully positively influence your team's commitment, their engagement, their happiness. Honestly, connection and an inclusivity makes people happy. Social connection has been proven to decrease your health risks. It can lower your anxiety, your depression, and what we're all about here at Talent Smart, it can help regulate your emotions. So if you're watching today and you're feeling like, oh, my team feels so disconnected, we're having trouble problem solving or overcoming simple obstacles, then let's continue to explore this.
Yeah. What made me think about like happiness also is I think feeling safe in an environment where I can be my truly authentic self allows me to be happy, right? I mean, like, no matter what our diversity is, that's the inclusive part, right? Is me feeling like I can share a thought, share an idea, my perspective, and we might or might not do something with it, but at least I felt like I could share it and not be looked at in a way that doesn't include me in the discussion, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that all those pieces, I think, are a nice set the stage of the why this is important. So how do we get started? So Kim, how does somebody, maybe somebody tuning in, and we'd love to hear from anybody who's tuning in, any of your points about what we're talking about. Share with us some of your experiences. But how does anyone who's tuning in, who's thinking, we're about to embark upon this journey of building a diverse culture, and second, having it be inclusive. So what can you share about getting a D, E, I, and B? And let's make sure that we clarify that the B is belonging. And between the two of you, I want you to make sure you touch on that a little bit. Getting it off the ground. And let's clarify. You notice I didn't use the word initiative. And I love that the three of us had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, because an initiative has an end date, but this is a journey. And so I think that's what I hope everybody who's listening in thinks of this as a journey. So what would you share, Kim, from your experience? Because you actually did such a nice job here at Talent Smart, and you're continuing the journey. So what do you think is a little bit of what people should know?
Well, thank you, David. And you both have been part of that journey. So thank you for this, inclusive adventure and journey. But for us personally here at Talent Smart, it really was about data and buy-in. I had met initially with a few employees who I knew were already interested in building out this type of program. So together, we created a very clear vision of what we were hoping to get out of this, what our goals were. We also, for anyone who's in HR or legal, we also researched our state and federal laws to maintain compliance and legality and ethics, of course. After that, we actually sent out a company-wide pulse check to gauge how employees felt about it, if they were interested, what their temperature was. And let me tell you, I have never seen such an overwhelmingly positive response rate for a pulse check. It was phenomenal. So it became very clear that we needed to make this a key business function. And leadership realized that as well. They realized the risk if we didn't make this a priority.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, we formed a committee, a DE&I and B committee, and we became even clearer on our goals, on our mission. We created a mission statement through that. And after that, we've invited the whole company to join in these learning experiences. And like you said, it is a journey.
Yeah, let me just say what I love about part of that whole journey has been is we included the people who work here in what do we want to do. Like it wasn't a top-down approach. So, and I think that's such a key for anybody who is looking at bringing this to their company. I mean, yes, you need the buy-in of leadership, truly true, right? But it really is more important than to find out what do you want as an employee. It's like, are we shooting too deep at first, right? Because this could be one of those topics that can get a little hairy at times, right? Absolutely. And so it's like, where do we start? And I think your journey of it has been really healthy for all of us to be able to kind of go on the journey with us and like wonder like what's next. Great. What would you add to getting this off the ground? Because I'm just saying this from a standpoint, you've been doing this for a while. Like you have helped different types of companies out there getting off the ground. Anything that you want to kind of share from that expertise?
Sure. I loved Kim's answers, and I loved being a part of it, even more importantly, as a member of the Talent Smart community. I'd love to set up my answer just with some foundational statements and how I see DEIB. So when I think of diversity, I say diversity is a fact. Mm-hmm. When I think of equity, equity is a choice that an organization makes, that individuals within that organization makes. Inclusion is an action. Let me say that one more time, because we're talking about building inclusive cultures. Inclusion is an action. And then belonging, it's an outcome. When you have diversity, equity, and inclusion, it creates this wonderful outcome of belonging. And so as when Kim was talking, I was just sort of just taking it in, listening to what she was saying. And if inclusion is an action, everything that she mentioned was an action. Mm-hmm. It's getting leadership buy-in, leadership role modeling, looking at inclusive policies and practices, and what does our state say about it? It's, creating employee resource groups or even feedback mechanisms. And then probably the action that I'm most proud of at Talent Smart is we didn't make this complicated, folks who are on the call. We took our own company values, our own content that we teach, which is emotional intelligence, and we took those 4 skills of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, and we said, okay, how can we live those 4 skills of emotional intelligence? And that's what Kim and our group does such a good job of, is taking our own company values and strategies and saying, let's talk about that. And that's our action step. So it's not something that's way out there. It's not something that's rocket science. Sometimes it's just the little things. One more quick thing, David, because people are thinking about action. Yep. I was on a call with a client this week, and they were concerned about their culture of their organization and how the leader was leading his team. And we got into a wonderful conversation as we were talking about the 4 skills. And he says, I meet with my team every single day. And I said, oh, you have a huddle. I said, I call them a huddle. He said, yeah, they're brief. They're quick 30-minute meetings. He says, I don't even require anybody to be on camera. And I said, tell me more. And I said, can I make a suggestion to you? I said, why don't you invite people to be on camera in that quick 30-minute meeting? Maybe, just maybe, it'll make people feel more inclusive. And when you could see one another versus just going through the rhythm of a daily huddle without seeing. And I related it to sports. Imagine a sports team, everybody in the huddle turning their backs on one another versus getting into that huddle and seeing one another. And he went, I never thought about it that way. How important maybe just hitting one button and turning on a camera could be. And not that you have to do that, but it's a wonderful invitation to extend.
Yeah,
so that's one quick, easy action that you can take.
Yeah, something else hit me that you said that we've been doing here with Kim's lead is really connecting it to the organization's values, to the mission statement. I think about organizations that sometimes when they're getting this off the ground, where they struggle sometimes is the lack of the connection to what we do. I think Kevin in our chat over here, I love how simple you put this, Kevin, because it's so powerful. Diversity is about celebrating differences and respecting others. And that's what comes from feeling included, is that I do get my differences celebrated. And I do get to respect others. I may not always agree with everybody's standpoint on it, but that's the beauty of having a DEI&B program within your organization. So let's face this next step that I'm going to put out there. There's always going to be naysayers in any organization, right? Whether it is, well, we don't really need this, we're just fine, or I don't agree with how we're positioning that, like almost a little bit what Greg said about with sometimes the politicizing of things. So Greg, how or what do we do to perhaps ward off, maybe it's from the beginning, these naysayers, or is it more deal with it when it happens? What are some best practices that you see?
So David, let me just start with the end in mind with that question. And I get excited, y'all forgive me. Because I've done training for many companies, diversity training in my role at TalentSmart and in my prior role at the Kim Blanchard Company. And one of the most rewarding things is when I do that pre-conference call or that pre-keynote conversation, and the organization tells me, we have people in our organization, we want to warn you, they're not going to buy into this. Right. And I say, I welcome those opportunities. And I really do welcome individuals that have a different perspective on different things. And when I finish the presentation or you finish the training, and those individuals who didn't initially believe it or have the same lens of what you're talking about or perception, when they buy in, it really, really feels good. Now, let me go back and answer your question. Yeah. You're always, in any change management process, you're going to have those who are advocates, who buy into what you do. And then you're going to have those who are naysayers. And again, great leaders don't push those away who don't always immediately buy into what they want to do. You try to figure out, well, here's 3 questions that I would ask to invite those individuals in. May I share with you what I'm seeing that you may not be seeing? May I invite you to share what you may be seeing that I might not be seeing? And then finally, what might we both not be seeing about this issue or topic? And what that does is it takes the pressure or the guilt or the shame or even the judgment off of the person, and it puts the issue on the table. So I welcome that, because it's all just a matter of different perspective and lens. And then in the end, we can celebrate our differences.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And LaTanya, I love that you just chimed in there about we need both perspectives, because that is what diversity is, right? It's different perspectives. And just because I'm coming to the table and telling you my perspective that hasn't been heard yet doesn't mean it's the one that is the most important one. So valuable to hear both sides. Kim, my question to you, kind of following up with Greg, and please share anything more that you agree or disagree with what Greg's saying. How have you dealt with any of the outliers? Because I'm sure, and I'm not asking you to call out any names here at TalentSmart, but I'm sure that there's been a couple of times when you had pushback or maybe heard some of that. How have you gotten that piece of the puzzle through the funnel, if you will, to keep moving forward?
Yeah, and before I answer that, David, I do want to say, Greg, I love what you're saying. Actually, one of our in our DE&I committee here at TalentSmart, we've created what's called rules of engagement as we enter these learning experiences. And one of our rules of engagement is actually the goal is not to agree, but to gain a deeper understanding. And I think that's exactly, with all different perspectives, I really like what you say there. So going back to your question, David, unfortunately, I feel like we have seen more and more resistance to DE&I, especially here in the United States, which is very unfortunate. But there could be many factors for that. Or honestly, there could be many perceived threats to DE&I. Also, it could just be a misunderstanding or unawareness of what DE&I means in a company. And it can also be that people are simply afraid to engage in such an emotionally charged conversation or environment. It can be scary. The unknown can be scary. So my recommendation would be to approach these naysayers, as you say, or resistors.
Resistors a good name, yeah.
With transparency, and try to provide clarity as to what, again, your goals are, your mission is, what the purpose is of DEI&B. And then sit back and listen to their perspective, and listen with empathy. Empathy will go a very long way. And then at the end of the day, like Greg says, it's okay if they don't agree. That's honestly part of diversity. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. I mean, I love how you said that too. It's like, sit back and listen, so that you can, potentially understand the other person's point of view. So let's talk about those secrets, right? That make this easier for everyone. And excuse me, pulling in some of these emotional intelligence strategies, because we know that emotional intelligence, it's a perfect partner when it comes to building a more diverse and inclusive culture. So give us some specifics. So Kim, what strategies are you intentionally leaning on? Have you found that you've relied on to really apply some of this DEI&B in what we're doing, and just really even for yourself too? So talk to us about a couple of strategies that you have. Yeah,
actually, I have two strategies that come to mind, and these two have actually been my top two this whole year, not just in DE&I, but in my personal life as well. So they hold a dear place in my heart. But the first strategy is to learn a valuable lesson from everyone you meet. When I said earlier, connection and social connection, that's what brings people happiness and value. So interpret every little human interaction, whether it's you're checking out at the grocery store or us all here today. This is a very valuable interaction to me. And I'm learning a lot from this, just being here with you all. But learn a valuable lesson from everyone you meet. Think about that as you go about your day. The other strategy that I'd like to share is to lean into your discomfort. Through this exploration and journey, you're gonna uncover blind spots, whether that's a personal blind spot or an organizational blind spot. Like you said earlier, David, there might be a policy in your handbook that actually that's pretty non-inclusive. Maybe we should revisit and rewrite that. The point is that you're gonna come into these blind spots, these uncomfortable moments. Try to lean into that, because just like connection holds value, discomfort holds growth. So
those are great. And I was going to say, even in our emotional intelligence program, we talk about leaning into your discomfort a lot, because it is the place. And LaTanya chimed in over here and she said that part of the fear is that nobody wants to say the wrong thing. Yes. That's such a valid point. And I would say that has become even more and more, apparent over the past handful of years, that we are afraid to say the wrong thing, which is a valid thing. But before I get to Greg to ask you some of your secret sauce recipes, what do you both think about that? About like, when you do say something wrong, right? I say the wrong term, like how should we, and please, anybody who's in the chat here, LaTanya, I know you have an opinion about this, but what should we do? Because if the fear is I might say the wrong thing, then what I think people are doing is just not saying anything at all. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is a little scarier than saying the wrong thing, and not knowing what to do if I do say the wrong thing. So let me open that to the two of you. What do you do?
So I'll take the first stab at that, Kim. For us at Talent Smart, and in my experience with working with other companies, the way you address that concern or fear or emotion is to create rules of engagement.
Yeah.
When you set the rules of engagement, there's no judging. just joining. There's no guilt. There's no shame. You know, when you use specific words to create rules of engagement, it creates the environment for conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And one of the things that we do at Talent Smart, again, remember that inclusion is an action. What are you actually doing? And so every time we meet, we don't assume that people remember the rules of engagement. We state the rules of engagement every single time. The reason why that's important, so that it becomes a part of your culture, a part of your environment. These rules become a part of who we are.
Yeah, great take. And Kevin, you even said that diversity is linked to culture. So if you are ingraining it within the culture, I think what you just said there is so smart, because I think sometimes at Talent Smart, Kim, when we do those and we revisit the rules of engagement, I don't think that anybody realizes that the reason that we do is to set the stage for that comfort level that I can sometimes say the wrong thing. So Kim, anything to add to that about what do you do?
Yeah, and piggybacking off of Greg's rules of engagement, one of our rules of engagement is actually calling people in instead of calling people out. Mm-hmm. So if you experience, maybe you said the wrong thing, there's a moment of learning and growth. Mm-hmm. Learning a valuable lesson. Gosh, EQ and DE and I really do partner well together.
They do. Yeah. Greg, how about for you? What are a couple of the pieces of the recipe from emotional intelligence to make this a little easier? What strategies are you going to toss into the recipe?
So I have to go back to what Kim said. The last word that she said in her statement, and we didn't plan this, folks. It was such a great segue. She ended it with talking about it's really about growth.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to create a more crucial conversations or space for conversation in DEI is storytelling. And so I would love to, before I share my strategies, just share a quick sort of story. Think about a newborn baby being born. We all get excited about that baby because there's new life. There's new life. But you don't stop at life with that baby and go, okay, baby's born. It's all done, and there's nothing else to do. If any of you have any children, oh my goodness, that's when the fun begins. That baby wants to eat every 2 hours. Not that I'm an expert. My wife of 32 years was the expert. But I remember my kids wanting to eat every 2 hours. It's on the clock, wanting to eat. And the goal of eating was to grow. And so when I think about DEIB, David said it earlier, this is not an initiative. This is actually not even a program.
Right.
I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say this is not even a learning experience. What I would say what this is about, it's a growing experience, because that's what this is all about. As an organization, growth. As an individual, growth. Be open to growth. So that leads into my two strategies. One is clearing away the clutter. Oh my goodness. My environment that I grew up in, my belief system, my values, my upbringing, my education, sometimes it clouds, how I see things. And it may even cloud my own perception. And so I have to step away and clear away the clutter sometimes in order to just really lean into the discomfort or lean into a conversation in order to be able to grow. And then my second one is being open and curious. Just really being intentional about coming into an organization, a culture, an experience, saying, I'm willing to grow. I want to eat every 2 hours, Kim. I want to feed from this organization. I want to grow. And the way you do that is to be open and curious.
Thank you for that. I still like to eat every 2 hours, Greg, so that's a problem. But just throwing that out there. I'm going to throw a strategy that I have found really helpful, which is from relationship management, and it's take feedback well. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because I find that anybody who's starting to dip their toe into this, right? Meaning that whether I'm just a participant or if I'm leading this, I do need to be able to hear somebody say to me, you're a little tough. on that discussion. You weren't open enough on that discussion, or you didn't really hear what people were saying. That's, I think, where growth does continue, right? Because I love be open and curious. That's one of mine. Is the more that I learn about other people's cultures, the way they were raised, it really does allow me to understand people better. That whole piece is that whole, that inclusiveness. Like I get to feel more included with others when I know more. But the taking the feedback well, that's a tough one, because most of us, we think we take feedback well, but I don't know that we all do it as well as we probably should, because also it's hard to get feedback on not taking feedback well, right? Like it's like, so that's the double sword, or the double-edged sword there, right? But I do think that that's a place that has served me well, is when maybe I'm questioning something, is being open enough to hear that maybe I didn't hear the whole statement. So yeah, please, I'd love to hear if anybody else is on the call here that has any strategies from emotional intelligence, or any strategies that you've used in being more open and inclusive. Greg, you were going to say something?
Yeah, David, I know, and we didn't talk about this or even going here, but sort of just listening, trying to be a better listener even to what we're talking about today. I thought about, oftentimes we said people are afraid to engage in even the DEI conversations because they may say the wrong thing, or don't have the answers, quote unquote, or feel like they'll be judged. One of the things I was thinking as I was listening that we do so well at our company is we have an assessment, only 28 questions, and it looks at our 4 skills of emotional intelligence. And I said them earlier, and it can tell you not who you are, but where you're at, as it maybe even relates to relationship management or social awareness or even your own self-awareness. But I want to take it one step further. So if you're an organization and you're thinking about how do I create or build an inclusive culture, one of the most wonderful ways to do it is to get a group composite report or an organizational composite, and to be able to say, okay, yeah, we want to let each individual know where they're at, but what about where's the organization at?
Yeah.
And again, it just provides, it doesn't say who the organization is, it just says where you're at. And it provides you a wonderful place to start and say, wow, as an organization, do we need to focus on, social awareness or even relationship management, and to be able to look at some strategies on how to do that, not just as individuals, but as an organization. And group composite reports allow you to do that. And there's a way to actually sort of assess yourself as an organization.
Yeah, that's great, Greg. And our producer is putting in some of our information. So as we continue the conversation, feel free to grab our email address, reach out for anything about our programs, about our assessments. I wanted to kind of take this next step, because we've been talking about building diverse and inclusive cultures, because you got to start somewhere, right? But I'm wondering about best practices for the longevity, right? For this journey that we've been talking about here. How do we ensure that the culture that we're building is thriving? And I want to also make sure that we touch on this extra letter that we've added that some people don't, right? We said D, E, I, and B, and the B is the belonging. That, to me, is where the journey continues, right? How do I belong to this journey the whole way? So, Greg, and both of you, but Greg, let me start with you. What's the secret for allowing this to thrive and continue?
Yes, I do have a few recommendations. And remember, I'm going to say it one more time. Inclusion is action. Yeah. Inclusion is action. So I think it starts out with leadership, a leadership commitment and role modeling. And that doesn't mean that leadership has to have all the answers. It means that leadership has to have the want to. And when you have the want to, then you can invite others to be a part of the process. And my second one is, having diversity in your hiring and promotional practices. That's one, every organization can do that. Third is, looking at your policies. Do you have inclusive policies and practices? Kim talked about this. This is how we started. But these are some things that you could think about to sustain your organization. What education and training programs do you have at your organization. And then finally, just creating employee resource groups or feedback mechanisms, including anonymous feedback mechanisms where employees can actually, have a voice, not necessarily a vote, but just creating a place where employees can have a voice in what's happening in the organization and building inclusive culture. So that's just a few things.
Those are some great pieces there. I wanted to highlight one of the things that Melissa said a little bit ago. She said, I think that it's a very important question. If you open that door, management has to be willing to listen, but also to respect input, not necessarily put down the idea or work to write it off. So I think that's like you just said that, Greg. Right? Management has got to be part of the buy-in. It can't be a check the box thing, right? Oh, we have DE&I now. Check. And oh, you're going to go to that meeting? Great. I have somebody from my team that's going to that. It has to be that the belonging piece is, what are we all doing? Part of that. I'm going to go to the to one other piece you talked about with the employee resource group in a minute. But Kim, I wanted to get your input on this as well. How do you think the journey continues?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is just that, David. It is a journey. So my recommendation is not to rush through. You don't need to check the box. Like Greg said, that's not what we're trying to achieve here. Honestly, psychological safety should be at forefront. And I think Kevin said earlier in the chat, trust and respect. Psychological safety, trust, respect. This is something that's going to evolve through these experiences. Actually, some of our favorite committee meetings and DE&I meetings all have a whole agenda of, okay, I want to talk about this, and this, and then we'll get in there and we'll be connecting, and that agenda will fly out the door because we are just together, belonging together, connecting together. So don't rush. Take time. Enjoy it. Learn.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, I think that sometimes when you have an agenda, I mean, agendas are great for meetings, right? But sometimes when it's about this topic, it's healthy to allow the agenda to go to the side in order for discussions to happen. So you do feel like you belong in this discussion. One of the things I did want to mention about employee resource groups, they are so beneficial in organizations, but they have to be for the right reason, right? And I had the honor and pleasure of starting the very first LGBTQ plus employee resource group in what had been a very conservative retail organization, very large across the United States, going back about 10 years ago. It is still thriving immensely. And we took a chance to say, hey, we think that there's voices not being heard here. And boy, I'll tell you, when we opened that door and started this group, we started bringing voices to the table that so many of leadership had not really heard, because people felt that they didn't know that they could have their voice. From that, I will share that what happened was we informed and influenced marketing decisions, as well as merchandise decisions, from how they displayed merchandising and also what they bought in certain areas, because that had not been part of the discussion. So I go back to the why at the very beginning. Now I have groups that get to talk together and say, what can we bring to the table that might help our organization even be stronger than we are? Women's groups, LGBT groups, African-American groups, disability groups, anything that is a diverse aspect that allows people to say, have we considered this? Have we thought about that? All of that is what I think makes every company who brings DEI&B to the table even stronger. What else do either of you have that you feel like we haven't touched on? We have a few more minutes, but I want to give you both an opportunity. Anything else that maybe pops out to you or anybody that's been listening to, we so appreciate. By the way, we know Facebook, you're out there. We know that YouTube's out there listening to us. Thanks for being with us. But by all means, any last comments from the two of you?
I'd just like to acknowledge what LaTanya said earlier based upon some of our comments. LaTanya said leadership commitment is more important than having leadership support.
Yeah.
So I pulled out my phone really quick because I said, wow, that's pretty powerful. Matter of fact, the word commitment just jumped off the page to me. Yeah. And a commitment is a state or a quality of being dedicated to a cause or activity. Support you today, not support you tomorrow. But it is a state of being, a quality of being dedicated to something. The word that popped in my mind, almost a covenant with your organization to really be committed to something and not go in and out. So LaTanya, thank you for sharing that. And my final thoughts are just don't feel like you have to do everything in each session that you have. One of the things that we do at Talent Smart is we reinforce and just constantly state that DEIB is a journey, that we're not headed toward a specific destination. So we're not going to answer everything in an hour's call, folks. We're not going to answer everything in an hour's call today. And to give us that grace, give each of us the grace to say, we didn't try to have all the answers today. What we tried to do is have a conversation around DEIB. And we'll have more and more and more conversations, one conversation at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Kim, anything from you?
And I guess I'll just say, if you're struggling to try to find a starting point, lean on EQ as well. Like David, you said earlier, they're perfect partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kim, Greg, thank you both so much for sharing your perspectives. I think this is a great way to kick off Global Diversity Awareness Month. It is all of October. You got 31 days to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in your organization in any way that you can. Get the conversation started. And I do want to remind everybody that if you're tuning in and you think maybe we should talk about bringing some EQ to our organization and you're not sure where that is, feel free to reach out to us. Our producer is going to put our information back into the comment section. Reach out. No pressures. We're happy to just have a conversation. We are a global organization and we'd love to be a part of your solution. We will be back, by the way, on November 2nd with our next Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We will be discussing how to drive trust and collaboration within your teams. And Greg is going to be stepping in for me as guest host. He has two them. Thanks for being a part of today's discussion. And remember, EQ is for your everyday life. We'll see you the next time, everybody.